Hallo allemaal! Hey everybody! Welcome back. In this YouTube video, we are going to be talking about 10 podcasts that you can use to improve your Dutch listening skills. Hi, I'm Yasmin. I'm the founder of the Dutch Master Academy, and today we are going to be talking about 10 podcasts that you can use to improve your Dutch. But first and for all, I want you to be reminded of the fact that we have a free Dutch masterclass in which I'm sharing my 4 secret techniques to mastering Dutch with you. When you are struggling to master Dutch by yourself at this moment, or you're not seeing the progress that you want to see, go to my masterclass and give it a listen, because I'm sure that you're going to love it and you're going to learn a lot. Some of my students have listened to this masterclass already and they loved it. So now we are going to be diving into 10 podcasts that you can listen to when you're trying to be improving your Dutch. We're going to be talking about easy podcasts, a bit more difficult podcasts, and a bit more difficult podcast. We're also going to be talking about Dutch podcasts from the Netherlands and Dutch podcasts from Belgium. So stay tuned, go through the 10 podcasts with me, and I've linked all the podcasts too in the description. So let's go. First and for all, we are going to be starting with the podcast Lang verhaal, kort. This podcast is really for beginners, so it's not difficult at all. It's a podcast from the Netherlands, and it actually offers every day around 5 p.m. a short story of 5 minutes about an actual subject that is happening right now in the world. So that for you, it's easier to listen to something new that is happening in the world, in the Netherlands, and that you can listen to as a new learner. So then the second podcast is the podcast Zeg het in het Nederlands. It's also one from the Netherlands. It's a very easy one and it's very slow Dutch. So they're going to be speaking very slowly. And there are a lot of different kind of subjects such as fashion, for example, designers, and even other kind of things. Then we have a third podcast from the Netherlands. It's also one that isn't too difficult because we have a transcript of this one. And it is really great if you want to get to know the Netherlands and their culture a bit more. Because it is called Podcast Door de Ogen van de Koning. So this is a 10 episode podcast with someone that is interviewing the current king of the Netherlands. And he there describes his 10 years being a king. How did they go? Then we are going to go into some more difficult podcasts. Let's start with Weetikveel. Weetikveel is a Belgian podcast. It's a bit more difficult than the other 3 that we talked about. It's a little bit the same as Door de Ogen van de Koning. And in this podcast, it's more like an educative podcast where we are going to be talking about a lot of different subjects. So it's good for everyone. It are shorter episodes and they're really easy to understand. So that's podcast number 4. Then I would recommend for you to start following, for example, the Nerdland podcast. This is also a podcast from Belgium and it's perfect for people that love technology because this podcast is mostly about, for example, AI, recent developments, innovation, and everything surrounding technology. So every month they do a recap of what happened in the world, what happened in the technology world, and you can be listening to that one. It's a bit more difficult because it's very technical and it has a lot of specific words that they are using, but it is really nice to listen to. That was podcast number 5. Then another podcast that is also kind of difficult, but not too difficult, and is about history is called Geschiedenis Inside. It's one from the Netherlands and they speak about different kind of history topics. They also talk about, for example, if things that have been told to people are true or not true. So this one is also a little bit more difficult because they're using different kind of words that might be very specific and so a little bit more difficult to listen to. Then we have 2 podcasts that are a little bit more in-between language. So in the Netherlands and in Belgium, we have languages that are spoken by people in their day-to-day life. It's not really a dialect, it's more as in real language versus textbook language. And so the podcast of the Netherlands is Kibeling the podcast. So here they also speak about the Dutch culture, actual subjects that are happening these days. They also do interviews and they tell personal stories, but they really speak a local, more not so textbook language. And we also have that with a podcast from Belgium, namely Vic and Gert. In this podcast, they're mainly speaking with the dialect of Antwerp. So if you're studying Dutch for Antwerp, this one is really, really good for you. But it's also good for everyone learning Belgian Dutch, as in Dutch in Belgium, because they are using this language. If you want to get more used to this accent, this podcast is perfect for you. And then we have 2 more podcasts. There is one podcast that is also a little bit more in the category of Nerdland and Geschiedenis Inside, and it is the Volksjury. It's also a Belgian podcast, and it is a little bit more a kind of humorous podcast about crimes and crime scenes and lawsuits and everything that is running around that. So this one is really for people that love true crime kind of podcasters, so they should be really listening to that one. It's also a bit more difficult, I would say, starting from A2, you can start listening to it, but it's a really nice one. And then, of course, the last podcast I would recommend to you, which is the most amazing one, is my own podcast. Why? Because in this podcast, we're speaking very slowly. On my YouTube channel, you can get Dutch and English subtitles, and we're talking about how to improve your Dutch. So this podcast is really amazing for students who want to learn more about how to improve their Dutch skills, how to learn Dutch more effectively, and want to get to know me, your Dutch teacher, a little bit more, because I'm also sometimes sharing some behind the scenes. So do go to my podcast, have a listen, and as I said, if you want to learn more about my 4 secret techniques to mastering Dutch, go to the link below, go watch my free Dutch masterclass, because I'm sure you're gonna love it. And that was it for today's video. Let me know if you're gonna listen to one of the podcasts, which one will be your favorite, which one you will try out, and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any new videos.